Hey everybody, welcome to another Rackspace Office Hours Hangout. My name's Alan Bush and I'm broadcasting live from the castle, Rackspace's headquarters here in San Antonio, Texas, in the former was it the Windsor Park Mall, wasn't it? Windcrest. Anyway.
Windsor Park Mall in Windcrest.
That's right, that's right. That's why we call it the castle, because it's the Windsor Park Mall. There's your Rackspace tidbit for the day. Anyway, we're broadcasting live, and we're doing another Office Hours Hangout. It's our show where we seek to educate and inspire the cloud computing community. And today I think we're going to be talking about a really beneficial topic to a lot of people. We'll dive into that topic. It's SSL. There's the hint for the day. I'll dive into that in a moment, but first I want to just introduce everybody that's joining us today. First, our co-host Drew Cox. Drew, how you doing today?
Doing good.
Great, great. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. So we also have another special guest on with us today, Lindsey Anderson, who is joining us from his home. Lindsey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going really well.
Yeah. So Lindsey, you are a remote racker. You've been with Rackspace for a while now. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been a racker and all that fun stuff?
So I've been a racker for about 3 years now, coming up in April. I've worked in the managed operations team for my entire tenure here, and I've also delved into some other projects, such as the CSR generator tool, and a few other internals as well.
Yeah, well, that's actually why we wanted to bring you on. You did some great work building a CSR generator that's vital to helping our customers get set up with SSL. So we're definitely going to be talking about that here in just a little bit. But that's what we're going to be talking about today is SSL, why it's important to encrypt traffic to and from your website and within the application itself. We're going to go ahead and talk about that now. So let's go ahead and talk. Oh, hey, real quick, let's talk about if you want to join us in this conversation. If you're watching and you want to join us in this conversation, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. Drew, why don't you tell us a little bit about how to join in on the conversation?
Well, first we have here on Google Plus a tool called the Q&A app. So you can drop your questions, punch that green button there on the far bottom right, and you can submit a question. So they'll give us a little bit more to talk about that's directly applicable to questions you may have or issues you may be up against. We're always happy to hear that. Happy to help where we can, and also in the comment section of either the Google Plus page or the YouTube page that's going to house this video. The other way that we are happy to interact and get involved is on Twitter. We have hashtags or handles down here, and then the hashtag CloudQA. So you can submit your questions or comments in any of those outlets, and we're always interested to hear what it is you'd like to hear more about and see what we can do to help out there. Bring in experts on topics that you're interested in and discuss how your business or your project can be made better through the tools that are offered. So that is.
Absolutely. We definitely want to hear from everybody that we can, and looking forward to hearing from more of you as we go along. Anybody out there watching that has a question about SSL, let us know, and we'd be happy to answer that for you. So let's go ahead and answer, I guess, the big question is, what is SSL and why does it actually matter? So let's try to figure out what that looks like and what we need to do to get started on SSL. So I guess at its most basic definition, SSL is just a way to encrypt traffic. It stands for Secure Socket Layer, and it allows you to encrypt traffic from your audience's browser to your server, right? So let's talk about some of the ways that that's actually implemented. Lindsey, as a system administrator, you help our customers encrypt their traffic on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of our customers use at least one SSL certificate per their environment. So yes, very common.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's kind of talk about that. You mentioned certificates, and I guess that's one of the main components of SSL, and so that's a certificate that acts as a public-private key pair that allows traffic to be encrypted and decrypted.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a more secure way to send data back and forth, and it also serves as a point to actually verify who you're sending that data to.
guess the verification aspect is a really neat aspect that I hadn't quite thought about today, at least. It's very important for verifying that the website is the site that you're at. I mean, I guess the layman's version of this is, when you're on your bank's website, you always want to make sure that there's that green padlock, usually something like that, in the address bar that shows that not only is the site encrypted with SSL, but usually a financial institution, something like that, they're going to go out of their way to find an extended certificate, right? That's going to actually say, that this is absolutely this is absolutely your bank, right? It's Bank of America, it's Security Service, Federal Credit Union, whatever bank you use, and they'll use that to verify them.
Yeah, so the extended validation certificates basically go through and add a bunch of extra steps in the process of issuing a certificate to a business. So they go through, make sure it's actually a legal company. They go through and actually physically verify the identity. And as few as a couple other steps are added in there as well.
Yeah, and well, let's kind of talk about that. So we have just the regular validation. I mean, if you are going to get a certificate from an authority, right? So a certificate authority, that's one of the components of this. You need to verify that you are who you are, and because verification of the site ownership is one of these crucial factors. So usually that's done with some type of adding a text record to your domain, something like that, to prove that you actually have access to that. So when you are seeing a site that's secured with SSL, you know that it's actually the proper owners of that, right? And that's what the certificate authority is there for, right? So tell us a little bit about that, Lindsey or Drew. Tell us a little bit about how the certificate authorities work.
I mean, there are a handful of them. You can definitely go the cheap route. It's not something you don't buy an SSL for pennies. It's not a huge investment either, but there are some really quick turnaround, kind of fly-by-night type of authorities that will not really do their full due diligence to ensure that you are who you say you are, and so you're just at that point getting a fancy self-signed certificate. You're paying someone else to generate for you. As you go through some of the more well-thought-of groups, Thought, VeriSign come to mind, they're going to basically charge a little bit more, but they are well thought of authorities, and so they do more due diligence to go in and ensure you are who you say you are, and you're going to get a little bit, there's going to be more time associated with getting that SSL cert returned. So I mean, there's some interesting things to consider there. A lot of times when you're in development, you're perfectly fine putting out a self-signed cert to go ahead and do that, where you don't have authority to say, this person is who they say they are. You're just using the technology behind SSL to encrypt that data. So a lot of times an internal tool for just you or for a business is going to use that approach, as opposed to going out and getting an SSL certificate from an authority like Thought, VeriSign, those types of people. Anything to add, Lindsey, that I either glossed over that I shouldn't have, or that bears repeating?
No, not really. I think you pretty much touched on it all. People are willing to pay more for extended validation or for well-trusted companies than they are for just a 99-cent certificate. So there are pluses and minuses to each, obviously depending on how much you're willing to spend.
Yeah, a lot of times it's timing, it's budget, and these are all concerns you're going to bring to any conversation that's going to talk about Pocketbook at all, but time to market sometimes is the most important thing. There's all kinds of factors depending on your approach. And so this is the basics of SSL. This is kind of a high-level look. But before you can even get an SSL certificate, you need to generate a CSR. And so that's kind of step one, and maybe step two. We need to go back a little bit further. But traditionally, you could generate one. You could go through your hosting provider to generate CSR. There's a few different approaches, but we have gotten a lot of volume of support requests around CSR generation, and because it seems to be something that many people are interested in, like help with like tooling around, Rackspace went to the work to build a tool that would make that a little bit easier, and Lindsey was involved in that to a great degree. And Lindsey, you want to talk a little bit about the CSR portion of that process and what we built around it?
Yeah, so the entire purpose of the CSR generator was to kind of alleviate the issues our customers saw. So basically we saw a negative experience when traditionally generating CSRs. It would involve a customer creating a ticket. The customer may not have all of the information they needed in that ticket, so it would then require a response from the Racker. Once they had that, they would be able to return a response to us, and then we would have to go through and actually generate it and get the data back to them. So it's quite a few steps to kind of get to the end result. So what we did is we just kind of created a tool to basically give us a single location to generate, retrieve, and share CSRs with the support team.
Great. I think we'll go in and do a demo of that here in a little bit to kind of show how it works and just how easy it is. So I guess we can go through the entire process though. So the customer would identify the need to encrypt their site with SSL. They usually come to us and ask us to create a CSR for them because we can help them and make sure that they make the right they select the right type of CSR and get that information for them. So we'd actually generate that, hand it off to the customer, who would then need to take it to a certificate authority. Rackspace does not act as a certificate authority, so we can't help you out on that step there. And then the certificate authority uses this signed certificate request to then create the actual certificates that are going to be used. The customer retains a private key, right? And I think that's one of these major components that we want to make sure that we're covering here. So the private key, Lindsey, tell us a little bit about what that private key does and why we need to make sure that that remains intact and in the customer's possession.
I mean, from the most basic way to put it, it's kind of like your key to your padlock. You don't want to give it out to the public. You want to keep it secret. So if anyone has that private key, they have the ability to decrypt that message and they have the ability to see what's inside of it. So the private key is really where all of this works. It's really the thing you need to keep, to yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you really don't want that to be floating around because you can either decrypt everything or you can use that same key to get a counterfeit certificate, and you can engage in a man-in-the-middle attack, which is where somebody pretends to be who they're not, and then I might pretend to be the bank, and you would hit the website and it would look like it was the bank, and then I'd get all your information and use it for nefarious purposes. So we definitely don't want that. Once the customer has their certificates created, right, you'll receive back from the certificate authority a couple of different files, and they're going to be a key pair that you would actually place on the server or the load balancer. And what are those different things? There's certificates, chain certificates. Tell us a little bit about the differences between those.
Yeah, so you generally, when you receive your certificate from an authority, you receive both a certificate and a CA bundle. A CA bundle is a certificate authority bundle, and it basically provides a chain of validation down from the root all the way up to the actual reseller that you buy your certificate from. So it basically just provides you a chain of trust. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the only thing you really get from there. That in combination with private key is pretty much all you need.
Yeah, absolutely. It is that chain of trust, right? So that goes from, and it shows, it's kind of like in the cop dramas, right, where you have that chain of custody. And so you get in trouble when the cop swings by Dunkin' Donuts on the way home from collecting evidence at the scene of the crime, forgets it there for a while, comes back and gets it, and then brings it back in. The defense attorney on this obviously a comedy that I'm describing right now says, hey, there's something wrong with that, and everybody gets in trouble. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that chain of trust is there the entire time, and that's exactly what that does.
It looks like we've actually got a question from Skip on Twitter asking if we could go into a little bit more detail, or if there's anything special we should know about working with a Wildcard SSL, which gets into a little bit more complexity around what an SSL can cover and how to go about it. So do you have any tips or tricks there, Lindsey?
Yeah, I mean, a wildcard SSL can basically be treated as a normal SSL certificate. The thing to remember when you're generating a wildcard certificate is to also include the actual domain you want as well as the wildcard. So, for example, if you're going to do example.com, you want to use example.com as a domain name and then use the wildcard as an alternative name, or vice versa, depending on your CA. Beyond that, there's really not too much trickery involved with it. It's treated the same. The wildcard will match all of those subdomains. Granted, they're on the same tier. So one stipulation people don't really know about is if you purchase a wildcard certificate for star.example.com, that certificate will not match star.dev.example.com. So it has to be on the same tier.
Right. So you would need two or more certificates then if you're going to have 2, 3, 4 tiers of subdomains, right? That's the takeaway there. Great. And those do generally cost a little bit more, but they are very valuable if you are, say that you are a software as a service provider and you have individual companies, and each of those companies that are your customers are going to have their own subdomain. It's one of those things that's going to be a great purchase. You don't have to go back and buy a new one because SSL is very specific. A dev.example.com is completely different than devs.example.com. I mean, one letter off and it's a completely different site. So to avoid that, that's where the wildcard comes in, and it's a great way to it's very cost efficient to go and get them in the wildcard format as opposed to having to get them specifically each time.
It even actually gets down to the spacing that you use. If you put another letter in there, you're going to see a problem, certainly, but it goes beyond that to you put a phantom space in a spot. You can run into issues as well. So it really, when you're going through this process, making sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed is especially important, because you can be thrown off by little things you didn't notice, even phantom spaces that you didn't see were there at the time.
Yeah, it's definitely important to make sure that you have to make sure that you're spending a lot of time thinking about your strategy for securing your site. Is it worth the extra time, effort, and money to get that extended verification certificate? Do you need to have just a single cover your domain and maybe a subdomain or two? Should you invest in a wildcard certificate? A little bit of extra thought at the beginning of the process will go a long way to making sure that you have a solid strategy in place and don't have to go back and repeat your steps over and over again. Great question as always, Skip. Skip's a longtime viewer of the show, and I really appreciate your input all the time, Skip. Thank you. Skip actually asked this question by commenting on Twitter using the hashtag CloudQA. If you're watching out there, we're more than happy to answer your questions, bring in your input by using that method. You can also use the Q&A app, and it looks like we actually have a comment here. Tyler, if you want to throw that up on the screen. We've got a comment from Stephen, who says that he just joined and he wants to thank us for having this conversation. Well, you're very welcome, Stephen. Thank you for watching. If you want to include your information, your comment or question that way, you can use the Q&A app on Google+, and just enter your question that way, and we'll be sure to answer it on the air for you. And then there's a graphic of how to do that. And then finally, if you're watching on YouTube or on just want to comment in the comment section of Google+ or YouTube, that's also one of the other ways to get in touch with us. More than happy to answer your questions while they're in there.
And one of the things, Stephen, thanks for watching, and if you have other topics you'd like to hear us cover, please let us know what those might be so that we can provide the most relevant content.
Absolutely. Skip came with a follow-up comment, so I want to make sure that we've addressed this as well. He said that the top-level domain is not protected on a wildcard SSL. Lindsey, can you make sure that we're on the same page on that one?
Yeah, so that just goes back to making sure that you are both generating a your domain name and then also your alternative name for a wildcard. So, example.com as well as star.example.com.
Yes, yeah. So when you initiate that certificate signing request, you can specify the top level domain, and then you would also want, or your just domain itself, and then any other alternative names. And usually that's going to be example.com and www.example.com, which would get both of those. And then if you purchase that wildcard, you would also get the protection of the any other subdomains, right?
Yeah, yeah. On the same lines, there's also a multiple certificate domain. Well, I'm sorry, a multi-domain certificate. It's called a UCC, or Unified Communications Certificate, I think it's called. Basically, it just lets you specify multiple domain names, so they don't all have to be within the same subdomain. They don't all have to use the same top-level domain. They can, it can be a few others. And those are also another way to kind of save you money and not rely on things like SNI.
So that would be something like, example.com, example.org, example.net, .info, .whatever. You could you cover them all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So it saves you a little bit of money, and in the end, you don't end up having to rely on some technologies that may not be fully adopted.
Yeah, great. That's a great tip. Thanks for sharing that one. All right, let's jump in and talk just a little bit more about SSL right before we go in, and then we'll do a demo on how the CSR generator that you help build works. So the one other thing that I did want to mention is that Google actually has recently changed the way that they are doing their rankings, and that's going to incorporate using SSL into their rankings. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that everyone's aware of. And also the Chrome browser, which quite a few people use. I think it's actually got the top spot now as far as browser share. But anyway, the way that it's going to display in the toolbar is going to change as people use different protocols for their browsers. So it looks like there's an older version of a certificate, right, of a keying system that you would use, and they don't want you to use the older one, and they're going to try to help push people off of that by changing the way that they display those sites in the browser bar. So we want to make sure that our customers are able to switch off of those and make any changes that they need to. And so we've already got a couple of tutorials in our Knowledge Center community. That kind of go through that, but hopefully we can also use this conversation that we're having right now to help people get those set up as well. Let's see.
While we're actually talking about this, I think one of the things that was in the news to a very large degree last year was the Heartbleed vulnerability, and with all the patches and the updates and the changes that have happened since then, it is important to go back and verify that if you have an existing solution, that solution is up to date and secure. Just because you use SSL, we're talking about encryption and the security that it brings, there can be issues with not having everything up to date and fully patched. So one of the things that I think you will continue to see with browsers like Chrome and with tools that are traversing the web is more and more attention towards security. And if someone is doing something that isn't fully up to date, you will see more and more alarms going off when you attempt to navigate or do navigate to those sites. And so as a person on the web, you need to be more aware of those things. But definitely as someone who's hosting content on the web, it's important to ensure your solution isn't one of the people left behind or the people who are still on older, out-of-date tools that may have some vulnerabilities. So because Heartbleed was such a big deal last year and doesn't go away, you have to have done the work to mitigate that solution. Go in and ensure that your solution has been updated, patched, and is no longer susceptible.
Great advice, as usual. All right, so Lindsey, let's go ahead and walk through the actual process of generating a CSR with the CSR generation tool that you built. Is there anything that you want to mention about the tool before we go and just kind of see just how easy it is to use?
I mean, so the entire point of the tool was to be very simple and straightforward, to get people to actually generate the certificates without having too much of a hassle or too much of a headache. We wanted to make it an easier alternative to submitting a ticket. So one thing to know is that when you do generate a CSR through this tool, it will create a ticket for you on your account, and that's either it's going to be facing you initially. So once you're ready to actually install a certificate, if you need us to install it, you just simply update that ticket. So the whole goal is to kind of take the focus off of work for our customers, kind of make their time spent more efficient.
Great, great. All right, Tyler, why don't you go ahead and fire up the live demo. We're going to play with some fire and see if we can get this to work. So Tyler, you've logged in, and now we're going to go ahead and create a CSR. This is at csrgenerator.rackspace.com. So just check that out whenever you need to create your own CSR. So we're going to click on that big Create CSR button, as you would imagine. Lindsey, I think you succeeded in making sure that that was simple to use there. And so we're going to go ahead and put in one for alamobeardclub.com, and then we're going to put in another alternate domain name for www.alamobeardclub.com. I guess this is where Tyler surreptitiously promotes the Beard Club for which we're both a part. And Lindsey, by the way, you would be a great addition to that club if you were local as well. It's a heck of a beard you got there.
Should have worn my Utica Beard Club shirt. I'm sorry.
We'll remind you next time. Yeah, that's awesome. So it doesn't take very much at all to get this set up. So really, what we're going to do is just need an administrative username or email address, right? That's going to be the person that's going to receive the confirmation questions. We need the organization name. That can kind of pose some problems when you get into an extended verification situation. So you want to make sure that, again, we've talked before, dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure that you are using the right name. But then all you really need is the city, state, and country. Any other thing you want to point out here on this page, Lindsey?
Just when you're going ahead and spelling out your city name and your state name, make sure you actually spell it out. A lot of certificate authorities will have issues if you just use abbreviations, like if you use TX for Texas, things like that. So just make sure you're actually spelling those out. Another thing is we've added it so that alternate names are generated for you. So for example, when you put in alamobeardclub.com, the first entry will auto-populate for www.alamobeardclub.com. That way you don't have to type it in. So when you generate it, it should only generate for one of those, but you don't need both of those in there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'm glad that we do that. It's a good feature there. All right, so let's go ahead and create it and see what happens next. All right, there it goes. All right, so it's going to take a minute, right, to generate the actual request, right?
So this screen is presented just because of the way we do batch processing in the back end. It's just so that our systems don't become overwhelmed when we have a large amount of CSRs. So to do that, we just kind of force you to reload it if it's not available immediately. So if you just reload that page, you should see it up.
That's great. That's one of the big tenets of web design that we preach, or about application design, is to kind of do things in parallel processes and don't make them all go sequentially. So glad to see us going. So here's the thing that we have right now. So we have a certificate, right? And this is the actual request. Just end it right there, Tyler. Don't show the private key. Yeah, so it's going to give you, like we mentioned, both the private key and the certificate request. The certificate request, you can actually take that to a certificate authority, and you'll just copy and paste it. So they'll ask you, to just drop it into a form on that site, and yeah, so you just go through there, and you always want to make sure that you grab those 5 dashes and then begin certificate request, the next 5 dashes, all the way through the last 5 dashes after end certificate request. You'll grab all that. You'll probably put in a lot of that same information, but you definitely want to make sure you grab all of that, and that's actually encoded with this private key, and it will only work with that private key. So that's why we want to keep that one hidden there. Anything else you want to point out on this page, Lindsey?
From this, it's pretty straightforward. Like you said, just make sure you include the entire block of text, otherwise you will run into issues.
I'll also point out that to the right you see a handful of SSL providers you could take this to. So if you don't have a provider of choice already, this would be a great place to start. So you wouldn't be out in the cold. We've even made a little list for you to take a look at. So those are all solid SSL providers that would do a great job taking care of your business and your encryption.
All right, so once you've gone there, yeah, and these are some of the probably the lion's share of certificate authorities out there. I mean, I would imagine that this encompasses a very large portion of the web there. And then once that's done, once they've got once they've got the certificates back, then let's talk about what happens next. So once that happens, there's a couple of different things that they can do. They can either install those certificates themselves, which is absolutely something that you can do. I mean, when you're a Rackspace customer, your cloud servers are yours. I mean, you can do that. But that's probably not why you're coming to Rackspace. You're probably coming for fanatical support delivered through people like Lindsey and hundreds of other rackers that do this on a daily basis. So, Lindsey, tell us what you would do, kind of some of the different options that are there once those certificates come back.
So I mean, it really depends on where the customer actually wants their certificate installed. So generally, in the managed operations team, we stick to installing certificates on cloud servers or cloud load balancers. That's really the extent of what we end up installing them on. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but that's the lion's share of it.
And can you talk through the differences, some of the pros and cons of putting it in front of your site through the load balancer or putting it on the web tier itself?
Yeah, so we do have different options for cloud load balancers. Obviously, with the cloud load balancer, it's going to allow your environment to be more scalable. You're not going to depend on resizing when you need more resources. So putting on the cloud load balancer kind of sets up that whole environment for a more scalable, cloudy solution, I guess is the best way to put it. Whereas putting it directly on the server, well, let me step back for a second. So with our cloud load balancers, we do have two different options. We have an SSL pass-through, which allows the SSL connection to be encrypted all the way from your client to your backend server through the load balancer. We also have an SSL termination, where the SSL request is terminated at the cloud load balancer, and that data is passed back to the servers as HTTP.
So through that encryption that decryption that happens at the load balancer level, when you pass the traffic back to whatever web server may be behind there, you're actually able to see more information about who that end user was, and that gives you more visibility. Whereas with a pass-through, it looks like it's all coming from your load balancer. So there are some ways you can work with those two components, but there are some changes that that you see in that traffic when you make that decision: do I pass the traffic, or do I decrypt and then pass the traffic?
Yeah, in that situation, it largely comes down to your application and its needs, or your needs as an organization. Do you need your client's IP address, or do you need that information encrypted all the way to the back end? I mean, in the end, it comes down to the customer's specific requirements.
Yep. Absolutely, and you want flexibility there to make the decision based on your specific needs, and that's something that should be talked through before you go ahead and pull the trigger on that SSL install.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the type of thing that you can always talk through with us here at Rackspace. We're more than happy to advise you on those. I think that Skip mentioned he had a tweet just a little bit ago that said, if in doubt, go ahead and talk it over with a racker, and that's absolutely right. So yeah, when in doubt, ask your racker team. Yeah, so absolutely, Skip gets it. He's a longtime customer, and he knows that we're absolutely happy to help on that. Let's see, what was there anything else that we needed to hit on today when we're talking about SSL?
I think one important thing is to deal with SNI appropriately. So SNI is server name indication, which it's supported fairly widely now. It basically allows you to do name-based virtual hosting for SSL, so you can have multiple sites on one IP address and one port. It kind of makes administration a lot easier. You don't have as many IP addresses. You don't have to pay for those IP addresses. The problem arises when clients are using older hardware or older software. So, for example, Windows XP, SNI is not an option. So in that case, if you have multiple sites spread on one IP address, and they hit those sites over SSL, they will see certificate errors.
That's a good caveat to remember. Good stuff there. Looks like we did have a couple more questions come in. I want to make sure that we've answered all of these questions. Bill Hertzing had a question here through the Q&A app, and I want to make sure we've touched on every single one of these. So we just missed seeing this while we were talking about load balancers. So let's loop back again real quick. How to use SSL behind a load balancer? How is traffic secured when systems are talking to each other? If using SSLs, what's the best way to manage them? So I think we talked about traffic behind load balancers and how that works. How is traffic secured when systems are talking to each other? I guess we need to address that just a little bit more. I'm not exactly certain what Bill is referring to when he says systems, but I think he's referring to multiple servers on one, in one application. So let's take it from that path. How are they encrypted when they talk to multiple servers on, within the same application?
Gotcha. So in most cases, in all honesty, they aren't. By default, a lot of applications will communicate over plain text. A perfect example is MySQL. So if you were ever to access a MySQL instance over the internet, that data would be transmitted in plain text. Anyone that's just listening on the wire could easily just read whatever you're trying to say. So the key there is to kind of layer the protocols. So you want to use something like SSH, tunnel over SSH, things like that.
Good. And then the last part of Bill's question there there it is. What's the best way to manage SSLs and how you manage them?
So that's a bit tricky. I guess that's kind of one of the points that we're trying to address with the CSR generator, with being able to recall those certificate signing requests and private keys, rather than having to store those in various places like tickets or in a notepad somewhere. We're trying to give you more of a central location to store everything. That way you can always reference it in the future if you ever need it again.
Yeah, that's great. So I mean, you can go through and say, and it's all stored on Rackspace's encrypted ticketing system and the CSR generator, which is encrypted as well. So it's not going to be, like you mentioned, just on somebody's notepad that all of a sudden their laptop crashes or it gets stolen, or something like that. I mean, it's here and it's secured. And so that's a great way to manage them. I think the only other thing that I'd want to mention too, and Drew, you probably have something to say on this, is when you're managing them, you want to make sure that you keep them up to date, and you want to make sure that you remember when they're about to expire, so that hopefully before they expire, you can go back and renew them.
Yeah, part of your CSR generation process should also be to set reminders for those expiration dates when you go and get that SSL cert. Once you know what that expiration date is going to be, verify that you have reminders early enough in advance that you can go in and renew or regenerate or whatever you're going to need to do at that point. If this is just a little side project that's going to be done by then you should be okay. If it's not going to be, then you need a plan. And so while you're going through this process, ensure that you have that reminder set up, that spot on your calendar, highlighted in whatever format you need it highlighted in, to remind you what time it is and that you need to go in and get that cert taken care of again, as it is that time of your year. So I think that is a hugely important piece. You don't want that expiring and then all hell breaking loose.
In the managed operations team, we actually set up monitoring alerts for customers. They'll actually tell you when your certificate is about to expire, and you can kind of set that threshold however you want.
which is a fantastically valuable piece of the puzzle, something that's already baked in. You just use more broadly. Very good. I think that we actually had an additional question from Skip. Doesn't SSL on a load balancer allow for failover to another server? So we talk often about not having a single point of failure. If you just have SSL live on an individual server and that server goes down, well, so did everything, or at least access to everything. It's not a full functioning tool any longer because the piece is out of the puzzle. Now, if you have a load balancer in front of that environment, that load balancer could blindly pass traffic, and you could still be up and running if a device goes down. Now, if you have SSL termination on that load balancer, you could have a server go down and be in the same situation. You're still passing traffic to the other devices in that pool. So it's the load balancer that provides that functionality. Where the SSL lives changes how that works, but it doesn't pull that functionality off the table. That failover piece, I guess we could use failover as the term there, but what a load balancer is doing is spreading traffic over multiple devices. A device is taken out of the pool, then you just have a smaller pool that you're passing traffic between. So I wouldn't necessarily call that failover, but it's semantic, really. The point is you didn't lose your entire functionality.
Yeah, and when you're setting up a load balancer like that, you also want to make sure that you're using our health monitoring checks on those. That way, it's still monitoring those back-end nodes. If one of those becomes unavailable, you do have that pseudo failover where you're still sending traffic to a device that's online rather than splitting it between one that's online and one that's offline.
Yeah, and then while we're singing the praises of load balancers, I'd also mention too the ultimate failover, which is setting up a custom error page. So if all of those nodes happen to be offline at the same time, you can actually set up your own error page that says that, and you can embed CSS, HTML into this error message, so it looks very much like your own site, but say, hey, everything's offline right now. We know about it. We'll get it fixed as soon as possible, something like that. So another great feature of the load balancers. I did think of one other thing that I wanted to cover on when we're talking SSL, and this is quite a common error that I would see with our customers a lot, where they would have they would see errors on their page, or they would throw errors in that, in the menu or the URL bar, where it would say, hey, there are some errors on the page. And that's usually because you have some resources in a content delivery network or something like that that are HTTP requests that are mixed in with HTTPS requests, so secure and non-secure traffic. Lindsey, I'm sure you've probably seen that same type of error before. Do you have any input on that?
So the most important thing is when you're coding a site, you should always be using relative links instead of absolute. So you don't want to reference HTTPS, HTTP individually. You want to just tell it where that file is located and let the protocol you're using decide which one to pull it from. You don't want to hard code those things. Yep,
great. And that's a really easy thing to figure out. Firefox has like Firebug, and I believe they have some built-in inspection tools. Chrome has some developer tools as well that you can use, and it'll tell you exactly what's throwing those errors. So, excuse me. So that's in there. I think we got another question from Skip. SSL and Nginx. Anything that needs to change to use SSL with an Nginx browser as opposed to an Apache browser?
There really is no change from a consumer end. On the server, it's just a slight change in the configuration of those files. So instead of having a certificate authority bundle separate from your certificate, they're all going to be bundled together and kind of just put in one file. Besides that, it's pretty much exactly the same.
All right. I like the easy questions like that. All right. Well, I think that's about it. Drew, did you have any other things that you wanted to hit on today?
I do not.
Well, Lindsey, what can you tell us about the future of the CSR generator? I think it's an awesome tool. It's something that I know a lot of us at Rackspace have been looking forward to for quite a while. So we're really excited and really thankful
to you for getting that out. What's next for the CSR generator?
So in the future, right now when you create a CSR, you're basically just getting a ticket created. It's going to create you a new ticket on your account saying this is where it resides. Here's a link to that CSR. In the future, we're going to be adding the support to actually input your own ticket number. That way, if you have an ongoing issue that you're currently engaged with support about and you don't want to create a new ticket and reference it, you're going to be able to just paste it in there and it'll paste an update for you. In addition, as kind of computation time gets less and less expensive, we're going to have to also increase the bit length of keys. We're going to have to change the hashing algorithms we use. So we're going to be adding the option to kind of pick and choose what you want. As we talked about earlier, Google's going to be kind of deprecating SHA-1 by the end of 2015. So you're going to start seeing things like if you're still using that hashing algorithm, you're going to start seeing your padlock turn to white, and then eventually it'll say it's insecure. So we're just going to give customers the option to choose which hashing algorithm they want to use.
And if they want to avoid that, if they're going to be setting up a new algorithm right now, when would you recommend that they use?
So we use SHA-256 by default in CSR Generator. So I would say just use that for now. It seems to be pretty good.
Great. And I mean, you can do any algorithm that you want, I think, but it just depends on how complex you want that to be, and it can be costly computationally to decrypt anything more than that, and it might be not as it might be overkill, and we don't want to do that. So not quite yet. All right, great. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us and talking about SSL with us with your with your CSR generator tool. That's great. Anybody else that you want to give a shout out to that helped get this put together?
Yeah, there were quite a few people. Steve Gayton was one of them. Pretty much everyone on their managed support team helped out a ton. So thank everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, big shout out to the entirety of the managed operations support team. Just for generally being awesome. Great. So thank you again for being on. Drew, thanks as always for co-hosting with us. We're going to go ahead and sign off for the week. We do this every week live on Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock Central Time. I think we have a show going up next week. We're just going to confirm with our guest, but it should be a good one as usual. If you're watching and you want to know or you have a show suggestion for us, hit us up. Drew and I both have our Twitter handles included right there, and you can hit us up on Twitter. You can catch us on the Rackspace Google Plus page as well. Go ahead and just drop us a line, or again in the comment section of the YouTube video. If you have any additional questions, we can answer those for you, or you can suggest a next week's show topic or something like that. So again, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you all next week.